opportunity here. So I agree with that. We do that. But it puts the emphasis entirely on the negative. I don't want to do that. Once we get these systems and models in place, then our work is going to switch to real thinking about strategies. How do we get over this difficult situation? How do we take advantage of this opportunity? How do we move society and move the organization in the next 4 or 5 years? And you know, that's heady stuff. Once public relations people get into that kind of strategizing, and the whole world is available to them, I mean, boy, we're not going to have to worry after that.
You're one of the most prolific public speakers I know, so you constantly get introduced here and there all over the country. What do they usually say about you in the manner of introduction? What do they like to pick out?
Well, of course, they tell the firm that I'm with, and they talk about PR Reporter, and I like to get them to talk about the books, you know, or things like that. But usually they talk about my having been PRSA president, having won the gold anvil, and that I've generally had a high rating in polls. But the thing that always gets me, just to show, is that the fact that I'm listed in Who's Who in America and Who's Who in the World. This makes a tremendous impression on them.
And they like to mention
they always like to mention this. This somehow means you're there, which those of us in the book know better than, but it certainly appeals to those who introduce you.
Are there some things that you feel you would want them to say about you and they usually don't? For example, you mentioned some books that you've written. Would you like to see that mentioned more?
Well, that, but I think more than that, what I would like to have them say, and you know, you just have to be so careful of not prompting them to this, but it would be nice if they could say, well, our speaker today, he really has an interest in pushing the frontiers of the field forward and has developed a number of theories and models for practice. And I also like to have them say that that our speaker today has a belief that public relations is a lot more than just a professional practice, but that we're really talking about the democratic way of life, how our society operates. And occasionally that will come across. Because we counsel a number of other firms and have, you know, for 35 years, sometimes they will say, well, you know, the public relations counselor is public relations counselor, and that's nice.
When did you enter the field of public relations? What job, what positions did you hold before?
Well, you know, this is my 43rd year of practice, and I'm not that old because I did something that no one could do today. I actually started in this field when I was 16 years old. I was a senior in high school, ready to go off to college. In those days, the Ford Motor Organization had what they called the Ford Dealer Fund. And they would give money to groups of dealers to conduct activities that were either promotional or social responsibility in the community. And one of the dealers in my hometown of Grand Rapids, Michigan, had an idea for a project like this, knew that I was interested in this because I had already been writing for the local daily and doing a column for them when I was less than 16.
Not the school paper.
No. I'm talking about the Grand Rapids Press, a circulation of 125,000, pretty important publication. But anyway, so he came to me and said, would you like to do this? Well, I right away saw dollar signs because I was going off to school in the fall, and so I started working with him and with the Ford people on that. And then when I got to school, this fitted naturally into me working my way through school as public relations director for my college. You know, in the 50s, every college, particularly I went to a relatively small school.
Now say that again. You were a student and you were the college.
I was the college's public relations director. Sure, but I mean in the 50s, a small school. I went to Kenyon College in Ohio, a wonderful school, but in those days they limited the enrollment to 500. And you know, you just didn't have, even fundraising for the schools in those days was still just sort of elementary. And so I was able to do that, and I just stayed in the field or allied fields ever since.
Now, were you a reporter, a
Well,
full-time reporter at one time?
Yeah, I had been, that's how I got this client when I was only 16, was that I had worked for the newspaper since I was 9 years old, starting out in circulation. And you know how these things are, just lucky. One day, because I played sports in my own school and did write for the school paper and for the local weekly in my neighborhood, the sports editor came down to find me in the circulation department. I guess I was probably collecting from the accounts in those days, collecting from people's paper deliveries. And he said, how would you like to come up and work in the sports department? Because I've seen that you do this and that. And so, of course, I said, great. You know, it was a lot better than going out on rainy days and knocking on people's door to collect for their paper. And so I started up there with him, and then I got a column, and I was reporting on most of the major high school and some of the college sports in the community. And so it just naturally led into this. But notice, now the 50s, and what I was doing was pretty much media communication. But then I got into this job, this first situation with Ford Motor, and it was clear to me that we were not going to be able to deliver what Ford insisted on to give the money if all we did was show them a bunch of clippings out of the paper. They wanted to see that we had touched certain public groups already way back then. So we would hold open houses, we would have the teams. Part of this was a sports activity, that's how I got into it. We would have the team go to junior high and show students how to do this and go to parents' night. And so the first thing you know, it was becoming more and more full-blown.
So, Pat, in a way, you have the traditional background of a public relations person, and I emphasize traditional here, of a media background, but it seems that you were almost immediately working in public relations.
Well, yes, I think that was, I think that's right. I quickly went beyond it. You know, that's the thing that always amazes me. If you work for the media, the first thing, if you're sensitive at all, that you find out is how few people out there really are paying attention to that. You know, you see your best friend and say, did you see my great article with my byline? And they say, well, gee, no, I didn't. And pretty soon you start thinking more broadly. But I was also lucky in that after I finished school, this is in the Eisenhower recession, as they call it, times were a little tough, and so I had a chance to go back to my paper and get a job. Well, this time I got a job on the business side in advertising. And I was able to parlay that into becoming the advertising director and really the publisher, absentee operator of a fairly sizable newspaper in West Virginia. Well, you see, here again now I'm looking at this differently. I'm looking at it from the business side as well as the journalism. And it just happened that when I was in West Virginia, the United Mine Workers had a strike. And of course, when they struck in West Virginia in those days, they just closed up the whole state. And so we suffered through the strike, and after it was over, it lasted just long enough that the economy had really gone to pot. And so when it was over, the publisher who owned the paper said, look, you know, your job, forget running the paper, you get out and help rebuild the community. Well, I did, and I was working with the chamber and with the union to get them talking together again, and first thing I knew, you know, I was doing relationship building. And so I said, this is more fun than being in newspapers.
How do you want people to remember you?
Well, I would like to be remembered for having really pushed the profession to understand the high calling that this is. That, you know, if you want to really get philosophical about it, and I've written a piece on this which has been widely distributed around the world, but I believe it. The future of the world may very well be in the hands, if not of public relations practitioners, though I think it may be, but certainly in the hands of this public relations philosophy. Until we learn how to come together, make accommodations, co-author the behaviors, the world just seems to get a less and less safe place to be. And so I really believe that the future of mankind is more in our hands than anybody else. And when I look at the other professions that might help, I am only more convinced of that. Lord knows the lawyers aren't going to bail us out. Certainly the doctors aren't. They're too busy, you know, trying to just get health care going. Management, holy Moses. I mean, it's not very humanistic, still, at best. And certainly religions aren't. There's 108 religious wars going on right now. Who's left? Who's left is public relations practitioners that really have a value to the individual, a value to people, and want those people to come together and learn to work together. So I think that for anyone who's in this field or wants to come in this field, they can go all the way from being a very limited technician to being a universal leader of mankind using this wonderful body of knowledge.
Thank you, Pat. This is a good place to end, and maybe we should say for humankind to continue its endeavors. Thank you.
Thank you, Otto.